So if you're like me, then you oftentimes when you're learning something new, you'll have this aha moment or a light bulb goes off where you learn something new and you wish you would have learned it 6 months ago or a year ago because it made you so much better. This video is going to help you guys kind of fast track your photography and have you taking professional looking photos in a short amount of time. Now you'll want to stick around to the end of the video because I'll give you guys some bonus tips that'll make everything so much easier to digest. Now I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I will have videos linked down below and you'll have an idea of like the things that you need to learn. So the first tip that I want to talk about is exposure. You need to understand exposure. Now, what is exposure? Exposure is the amount of light that hits your camera sensor, which increases or decreases the brightness of your photo. So if you think about it, basically, when you hear exposure, think brightness. Now, there's 3 different components of exposure that you need to understand. The first is aperture, the second is shutter speed, and the third is ISO. They all control the brightness of the image that you take, and they also control one other component. For instance, your aperture is basically the opening in your camera's lens that allows light in or out. This also increases or decreases your depth of field. Depth of field is basically how big the window is of focus, right? If you've got a very big opening, then you're gonna have a very small focal plane, right? Your focal plane may be this big, right, from the side. So you may be focused from like here to the back of my head. The lower your aperture, the more items or the bigger the plane will be in your photos of what's in focus. Your shutter speed is how long the curtain in front of your sensor opens and closes to let light in. 1/2 of a second, 1 second, 2 seconds. That's a lot of time for light to hit the sensor. Whereas if you have a faster shutter speed, 1/200th of a second, 1/1000th of a second, so on, then it's a very short amount of time, so not as much light gets in, which if you think about it, the faster your shutter speed, the less light. The slower your shutter speed, the more light. And then your ISO is just the sensitivity of your sensor to the light that's hitting the sensor. So think of it like if you've ever woken up in the middle of the night and someone turned the light on for whatever reason and your eyes like take a second to adjust, it's because your eyes are super sensitive to light. So think of it, you crank your ISO up, you increase the sensitivity to light, right? The brightness just increases and decreases with your ISO. The second thing that you guys need to understand is composure or composition. Composure is basically balance within your image based on a number of different components that you can add or take away from your image. You can use leading lines in an image to guide the viewer's eye to a specific point or subject, which makes the photo more interesting. There's also the rule of thirds. You've got 1/3, 2/3, and the third. And basically you can put the subject of your image in each of these thirds in order to create more balance within the image, leaving some negative space on one side or the other, or in the middle of the image. Speaking of negative space is the empty space around your subject. There's a lot of different creative ways you can use negative space. You can use them in landscape photos where you have your subject here in a lot of negative space. You can use the sky, you can use a number of different things to make your photo a lot more interesting. And the last thing that I'll talk about when it comes to composure is symmetry. Symmetry in an image happens when 2 halves of your image mirror each other and balance each other out. It creates symmetry. This is really pleasing to the viewer's eyes and makes your images, or can make your images, very interesting. Once you have all those things narrowed down, then you can start looking at different brands and what they have to offer based on what you need. Right, there's a lot of brands out there: Canon, Sony, Fuji, Olympus, and many, many more. So adapt what you need to the cameras, do some research. Personally, I use Canon. That's what I've always shot with, so it's really hard to like go from one brand to another. So make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. A few more things to keep in mind. Some people need more structure than just YouTube. So if you're just using YouTube to learn how to do photography or videography, consider using some kind of video course. For instance, when I started, I used a bunch of books. I used lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning, but now there's Udemy, there's I think Skillshare. There's a bunch of different video applications out there where you can just take courses. So I recommend doing that to get a structured idea of each specific topic. For instance, if you want photography 101, or how to use a DSLR, or how to do flash photography. There's tons of different tutorials out there, and that structured course learning environment can be really helpful for some. Also, if you guys have trouble on determining what you actually want to shoot, don't be afraid to shoot everything. Or just go into your phone and scroll through your gallery and see what you take pictures of, which pictures do you like the best, or on your Instagram. And then start there, start taking those photos to really get an idea of what you like. Lastly, when you're first starting, do not be afraid to shoot in automatic mode. So you can use auto, you can use aperture priority, you can use shutter priority, you can use all these modes to kind of automatically get the exposure that you want while focusing on other things. Maybe you go out and you say, I'm just gonna focus on getting symmetry photos, or you wanna work on composition with leading lines, or you wanna get really, stop down your aperture and get some really cool depth of field shots. That way you don't have to focus so much on the settings when you're first starting out, when you guys do pick it up and understand manual mode, it'll come second nature. Speaking of manual mode, if you guys do want to learn how to shoot in manual mode, or if you want to just see how I run my photo shoots, click on one of these videos here and I will show you step by step how I run my photo shoots or how to shoot in manual mode. Until then, my name is Christopher Obona and I will see you all in the next video.